So, hi Ashman, welcome to Goodera. And I feel honored to be sitting with you today and discussing about the work of your nonprofit, Global Changemakers, and celebrating the World Youth Skill Day together. Thank you so much for agreeing for this interview. And if it's okay, can I start with my first question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone who's watching it. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Amrisha and the Goodera team for inviting me and Global Changemakers to celebrate this special day. I'm very, very excited to dive into it.
Thank you. Yeah. So, my first question is why do you think it's important for us to celebrate this day?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great place to start, I think. And I think a lot of people don't have as much of a chance to reflect on what this day means, what this day means for them, for the community, for the world. And so thank you so much for starting with that. I think today is about really understanding that young people are not in a passive position, just waiting for things to change, just waiting for something to happen in their lives and with the world's problems. I think we're seeing more and more in my personal life, in my work at Global Changemakers, and the people I talk to. I think I'm realizing more and more that young people are not passive, they are active citizens that really want to create, implement, and scale the solutions that the world needs for the world's most pressing problems. So I think the significance of this day is like remembering for us young people of our own capacity to create change, to inspire each other, and to be able to kind of trust our creative confidence and our ability to create the solutions that the world needs. And I think to give some like context to this as well, as you guys know, probably if you're watching, you probably know that we are undergoing the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda that started to be negotiated in 2012, got implemented in 2015 across all of the member states of the UN. And just for context, this is like the 17 global goals that we want to achieve. And they are very comprehensive. They include social, environmental, political spheres. The objectives really range from eradicating poverty to promoting economic growth, clean energy, quality education, all that stuff that we love. And at the same time, I think this is super interesting. At the same time that this agenda is being developed and implemented and negotiated and so on, we are also seeing an increasing number of young people in the world. We are actually living the largest generation of young people in history. Research says that we have about 2 billion young people between the ages of 10 and 24. And roughly 90% of those young people live in developing countries. And I think this says a lot about how key young people are to define how we want our countries, our communities, the world to develop in the future, and how key they are to implement those solutions and to scale those solutions. And so along with that, in 2014, which is interesting because it's like the year before the Sustainable Development Goals were implemented, the UN also declared July 15 as the World Youth Skills Day to celebrate this very strategic importance of equipping young people with the skills that they need for employment, for decent work, and for entrepreneurship, of course, like the skills that they need to create and implement the solutions. I read recently a report by the UN, I think it was launched in 2018, and it said, with the right skills and opportunities, youth can become the driving force behind sustainable development, world peace, and security. Not necessarily the government, not necessarily the companies, but the young people, that have this role of looking critically at the state of the world today and really trusting their creative confidence to come up with the solutions for it. The UN also identifies 5 roles that young people can take in that process. I recently published an article about this, so I invite you all to read it. I'll send you the link later. But basically, there's 5 different roles that the UN have identified for young people in this context that we're living today. The first one is critical thinkers, so we can really be critical about our past, our history, look at the present, and be critical about what's the future that we want to build. Second, change makers, of course. Don't even have to explain that, being responsible for really driving the change that we need. Innovators, doing so in new ways, in different ways. Again, thinking critically about how things have been done and innovating to make it more effective, more lasting impact, more diverse, more inclusive, and so on. We can be communicators as well, so we also have this role of using, the communication technologies that we have at hand to disseminate this message to other people, to make it available, accessible to other people, and we can be leaders. This is the fifth one. And I believe very deeply that we are in a very strategic position again, because we can look at the past, be critical about it, but we still have the time and the resources and so on to decide what's the future path that we want for development. And so I think the significance of this date is to really celebrate the fact that we are capable and that together, like collectively, we can design a future that we want. And for that, we need the skills that will enable us to implement that creativity, that mobilization power that we have. So I think that's why it's so important that we're having this conversation.
Yes, absolutely correct. So, Yasmin, like you mentioned that 90% of the youth population of the world comes from the developing countries. So, what do you think how can a government play its part, and how can they make sure that they use like 100% of the youth power that they have? If we consider these developing countries in general, also considering the fact that you mentioned that even UN is very critical and is very active in this field.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and I think the public sector has a very critical, very important role in enabling that potential, enabling the changes that we need to make. And I think a lot of that goes through education. I think it goes through rethinking our education system, making it more aligned with the skills that the young people need today to help solve the problems that the world is going through, that our countries are going through. I think a lot of young people will relate to this. If you think back in your time at school, university, and so on, how much of what you learned actually supported you in the problems that you face as an individual, as a professional, and also the problems that you want to solve through your change-making initiatives. I imagine very little, right? So that's I think the gap that public policy in education that the government needs to fill is to approximate education to the skills that we actually need in the world to make this happen. I think education and skills development should really go hand in hand. And if that's not happening, that's where we have a problem. That's where we're losing potential of the youth today. Recently, I think last week, there was a new report that was launched here in Brazil, and it said that Brazil is losing or wasting 40% of the potential of our young people, our children, more specifically. And so that's where we have a problem. Children are going to school, they are having access to education, but how much of that education is actually driving their potential, is actually close to the skills that they need to develop. And I think the role of education should really be to give us the critical thinking skills and the practical skills that we need to solve real world problems, whether they're individual, collective, and that will enable us to think systematically on how those problems affect others and how we can make sure that our solutions are inclusive of everyone as well. There is an amazing researcher, professor, author here in Brazil. His name is Paulo Freire. I highly recommend people who are interested in education reading him. And he says, one of my favorite quotes from him in his book is, "It is necessary that the weakness of the powerless is transformed into a force capable of announcing justice." And along with that, he always says, there's no such thing as neutral education. Education either functions as an instrument to bring conformity or freedom. And we need education to bring this freedom of young people taking charge of their own future and of their collective future as well. They need the critical, the practical skills to be able to take that step. So I would say where the government can step in is creating sound education, public policy, and implementing that in a way that will lead us to the future that we want to build and will tap into the potential that young people have.
Exactly. So I believe these governmental policies are a glue between the education and the glue between the skill development that we talk about. And there's also this notion that goes around that says that everything in our world has developed except for our schools and our classrooms. So, Yasmin, I wanted to know, how does your non-profit Global Changemaker bridges this gap between education and skill development?
Yeah, absolutely. At GCM, we deeply, deeply believe in the power of young people to create change. We've been around for 14 years now, doing this work, and we've seen incredible results of what young people can build, implement, mobilize, create, and it's been amazing to witness that. So at GCM, we have a few different programs that support young people in becoming the change that they want to see in the world. We have a mentorship program for young people aged 15 to 22 that guides them into understanding what's their story, their context, what problems affect their communities, and how they can be a source of change for their community. So it's for the young people who are just starting out and they want to figure out what's their role, how is their unique way to change the world, and they're paired up with a mentor from our community to be guided in that process. It takes 12 weeks and it has 5 different chapters: self-knowledge, empathize, create, manage resources, and persist. Those are the 5 chapters that we have in the program. And then after the mentorship program, they are inserted to an alumni community and they continue in touch with each other and receiving support from our network. We also have an online school called the Changemaker School, and this is where we have courses that will really help you complement the skills that you learn in formal education settings. So we have skills such as facilitation that helps us create really strong teams and collaborations and so on. We have project management course, which guides you on all of the steps of managing a project, from conceptualizing an idea to implementing, evaluating, sustaining the impact in the long term. We also have a new course coming up on ecology, so stay tuned for that. Other than that, we have some punctual events as well focused on capacity building. So we have the virtual youth summits. We also have every now and then some webinars and workshops that you guys can attend. There's a lot of recorded events as well on our YouTube channel. So if you want to start from there and take a look at the things that we are teaching and perhaps join us for our next event. You also can organize your own event with us using your methodology. So this is called the Gcmx Program, and we host events in all sorts of languages, in all sorts of countries in the world. You guys can apply to host an event in your community, and we will give you all the training, materials, support that you need to do that, and you can do it in your own language even, which is super fun. We have done that in many languages in the past, and so it's one of the ways that we sort of expand our impact more. You guys can reach us where we're not yet, so this is very exciting. We also have a bunch of free tools available in our website and on YouTube. We have toolkits on project management, design thinking, fundraising, social media, monitoring, and evaluation. We also have a podcast called Young Changemakers. So if you're like me and you're like listening to podcasts on your way to work or on your way back home or while you're cooking, washing the dishes, you can tune in and listen to maybe one of the stories of our change makers to understand their journey, their challenges. We also have several episodes about the GCM programs themselves. So if you want to dig deeper into a specific program that you're interested in, you can also go there. And like I said earlier, we have a bunch of webinars on many different topics that touch upon the skills that young people need to create their own change-making initiatives. And those are available on our website and on YouTube. And lastly, what I would say is that we have an amazing community, an amazing network. So everyone who goes through one of our capacity building programs, they continue in touch with us. And then within the network, we have several featuring opportunities to connect them to relevant opportunities that will help them advance their projects. We also have volunteering opportunities within our team. If you want to have more of like a professional development experience within an international profit, that's also a possibility. And something that I haven't mentioned, but it's super important for us, is that we have a seed funding grant program for youth-led projects. And so we open up on average twice a year a call for applications, and those are for the students who have completed our project management course. So if you go through the whole course, you can be invited to apply for a grant. We have supported over 150 projects in over 120 something countries in the whole world, and we have impacted directly and indirectly over 15 million people through this project. And so something that we're super, super proud of. We are a pioneer organization in doing this. We are among the first organizations, if not the first, that started giving out grants directly to young people to implement their projects. And we support projects along the process as well of implementing the grants, monitoring their results, and so on. So we are always looking for incredible projects to support. We are always looking for new partners and sponsors as well to be able to increase our impact even further. So there's a lot of ways to stay connected with us, to stay tuned. So yeah, if you're interested, go to our website, subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on your favorite social media channel. We are everywhere, including TikTok now. We're still learning, so bear with us on TikTok, but we're there. YouTube, Instagram, everywhere, Twitter. So just find us on your favorite platform.
Oh my god, I just loved your energy, the way you were explaining about your
I get
non-profit.
excited.
Yes, and that is so pure and so true. And this really shows that how connected you are to the workings of global change
Yeah.
makers. And this is really so good to see that you're so passionate about whatever you do. I could literally see that through your body language. I just loved it.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you so much, Yasmin, for all of these amazing projects that you've been talking about, and all the best for the new projects that you mentioned, like economics and the other subjects as well. So yeah, I really hope you get the volunteers or the funding or more people to support you, and anything that you feel would help you reach where you
Yes.
want to go. So that was so
Yes.
amazing. Yeah, Yashmin, coming to my next question, I would like to know what change has pandemic brought to this whole procedure, to this whole structure of education, and then learning skills, and then developing skills, and all of that.
Mhm. That's an interesting question. Very deep one as well. I think um, this goes back a little bit to what I mentioned before in your previous question, that I think in general we noticed with the pandemic even more the disconnect between what we learn in school and our formal education systems and what we need to go through these kinds of unexpected events and rapid changes that the pandemic brought. Um, I think on one hand, a few of us were able to dedicate more of our time and opportunities to developing our skills while at home during the pandemic and so on. But most people, saw and witnessed firsthand the discrepancies in terms of access to skill enhancement that we need during this time. So I think most people didn't have the means to continue their skills enhancement and were kind of forced to adapt to this very fast changing kind of new world order that we're living now because of the pandemic. I think this is very concerning to me. I think in my country, at least, I'm sure in many of your countries as well, we saw the discrepancy in access to basic sanitation, food, access to a stable income, technology at home, like basic things that we would need to even think about enhancing our skills during this time, right? And I think many students lacked the technology that they needed for home-based learning. They have very limited means and had to kind of go around those limitations and be very, very creative to continue enhancing the skills and developing themselves during this time. Research says that there's a big risk of young people never going back to school, and there's a lot of undoing years of progress made in education around the world. And I think this creates a ripple effect as well of discontinued access to education, especially for those groups that have been historically left behind. So I think for those people who did not have access even to their basic rights and basic technology at home to continue their skills development, it's going to be continually difficult for them to kind of catch up and have the skills that they need to go through this period and get stronger and so on. And even for the people who were able to have access to internet and like all those basic rights at home and so on, we were going through a lot. I think this is something that affected every single person. Like, and there's research that says that even for adults, they faced additional barriers to continue their educational projects during the pandemic. So this is something that really affected everyone. And I think as we reflect on this and the consequences of this, that the pandemic brought to skills enhancement and its effect on both formal and non-formal education systems, I think the question that we need to pose ourselves, our governments, our change makers, like everyone, is how can we make sure that access to skills enhancement is equitable, especially as we're trying to recover from the pandemic that has increased inequalities related to education access, right? As we go forward, how can we make sure we don't leave anyone behind when these kinds of world events happen? So yeah.
Yes, it did answer the question, and there's no denying the fact that people were benefited from the pandemic and the lockdown, but then there were another major chunk of people, and considerably students, that really had to feel the push that they push to their like the blockage to their further studies or to their education, and unfortunately they belong to more disadvantaged group of the society. So personally I feel that this is where the governments and these non-profits, they should come step in and help them, which Global Changemaker is doing already. So yeah, that is great. And Yasmin, with this question, we have come to the end of this interview. And thank you so much for all the great work that you've been doing and making this world a little better place to live in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this time. I think just to kind of close our conversation as well, I would like to pose the question of, considering all the changes that we're going through and how important skills enhancement, skills development is, and how much it should be connected to our education systems, like everything that we've been saying in this interview, right? One question I would ask the audience and that I would really like you to take with you from this interview is, how can the young people of diverse backgrounds be included in the changes that the world is going through and in the solutions that you guys are creating? Whether you're a company or a young person or someone that works for the government, really think about how to include young people from diverse backgrounds in that process. Work with them and not for them, right? Listen to them actively, read what they're writing, follow them, see what they're saying on social media about the problems that they care about, support them, trust that they have a valuable opinion, perspective on things, trust the skills that they have. If you want to create something that will be inclusive and that will actually enhance their skills and their potential and so on, they can tell you what they need. They can tell you what are the skills that they want to develop. They'll tell you, like, just listen, right? I think a lot of times we are like doing a lot of research and asking experts and so on, which is super valid. We should keep doing that. I'm all for those things. But sometimes it also takes a little bit more of being close to young people and listening to them. And when you have a chance, and if you're in a position of power in any sector of society, connect young people to important stakeholders. Make them be listened at like high level discussions, right? Give us a seat at the table. I think we really need that. That's part of enhancing our skills and making sure that we create a world where we want to live in. And if you're a young person, this is, I think, my final message. Take care of yourself. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of things we want to develop. I was looking before this interview at like the list of skills for the future, whatever. There's like hundreds of things that people expect us to know for future jobs, for like how the markets are developing and so on. But don't forget to put yourself first. I think there's a huge pressure of us being the ones who are going to solve the world's problems, but we're not going to be able to do that if we're not well with ourselves. So I think the most important skill ever that we need is self-awareness, self-knowledge, self-care, Be able to say no when needed, be able to get the rest that you need, support your friends, create a support network around you, because only if we're well with ourselves and only together, we'll be able to make the changes that we want to make in the world. So that's the most important skill that you can gain. Practice that. Practice being rested, well with yourself, healthy, take care of your mind, your heart, so that we can have the strength that we need to create the change we want.